It seems kind of obvious, but hackers don't like going to jail. Most people don't. So they know that any evidence that they leave behind is a potential liability for staying out of jail in the future. Certainly, any evidence that they leave behind allows the administrator to understand what happened. It allows the administrator to analyze the attack, which systems were compromised, how the attacker got in, what the vulnerabilities were. An attacker typically wants to leave those vulnerabilities in place, wants the administrator to not be able to apply patches or close ports or change passwords, not to understand where the attack came from. So first and foremost in that space is ensuring that the administrator doesn't know where the attack came from, if in fact they find out the attack happened at all. The best way or the best effect of track covering is to hide the fact that the attack happened at all in the first place. The administrators simply don't know what happened. The best kind of ethical hacking report is one where the entire IT staff shows up to hear the results and they expect the results to be, couldn't get in, no effect, everything stopped me. And the actual results are, look at all of the information I have. Look at where I broke in and what I compromised. And yes, and here's how I hid the fact that I attacked in the first place. And here's how I covered up all the evidence and erased all trace of me being there. That's the best kind of ethical hacking report to deliver because it's the most surprising and usually results in the biggest change to the defense of a company. They usually take it much more seriously if the compromise shows up that way. And certainly an attacker, a nefarious intruder, wants to spread confusion, wants to make sure that the target doesn't get a chance to respond either in a timely way or at all. So hiding the attack, hiding the methods of the attack or the attack at all, even if the target finds out the attack happened, they may not be able to respond to it. They may not be able to figure out which ports were compromised. They may not be able to figure out what malware is actually infecting their systems, which systems are infected, and so forth. That's the best kind of nefarious attack, really, because it means that either the entire organization has to decide, let's do security again from scratch, or they're going to have to wait until another attack to gather better evidence. And waiting around for another attack is obviously a recipe for disaster. And for an attacker, it's a recipe for further compromise. Typically, covering tracks is a combination of processes, two main categories: identifying the systems that are likely to reveal evidence of the attack, likely to actually either carry the evidence themselves or report the evidence out, and then either avoid or erase the evidence. Avoid leaving it in the first place. Usually that's absolutely the best way. No tracks mean no tracks. No evidence there means you don't have to worry too much about whether the evidence got picked up quickly or whether it's analyzed, because there is no track to analyze. In many cases, that's not possible, and I'll show you where in a moment. In the cases where it's not possible to completely avoid leaving a tracks, it's the best to just simply cover them up as best you can, and I'll show you techniques for that as well. As an ethical hacker, you want to know which kinds of systems, and these aren't specific versions or operating systems or applications. These are general categories of systems that you need to be concerned about when you're conducting an attack, which may preserve evidence or may not preserve evidence. First of all, attacked systems, so the systems that you actually compromise, they're obviously going to have the capability to store some information. Intrusion detection systems, firewalls, honeypots, these kind of intermediate security-focused devices that are designed to actually set off alarms and notify folks and preserve that evidence. And then log collection systems. These are kind of multi-purpose. Some of them are used for administration. Some of them are actually used for security log collection and event collection. And it doesn't really matter which is which in this particular case because the techniques are the same for both. The attacked systems, when you're attacking a system, it's almost impossible to completely avoid leaving evidence. And in fact, in a lot of cases, you don't really need to avoid leaving evidence because it's pretty easy to erase the evidence that you're going to leave as long as you leave it in a careful process or a careful fashion. So I'm going to show you a couple of really good examples of both easy avoidance of some evidence building in the first place, and then removing most of the rest of it just manually. Intrusion detection systems, firewalls, honeypots, you've learned about these already. These are really the only way to avoid leaving evidence is simply to avoid them entirely. Stay away from all of these systems. Don't get anywhere near them. Don't try to compromise them. Typically, don't try to attack them. Why? Because they're all designed to sound the warning bells and bang a gong and get an administrator involved as quickly as possible. So the moment you touch them, you may be setting off alarms. And I'll go into specifics on those in a moment. And then log collection systems. It's typically difficult, if not impossible, to avoid them entirely. So the best approach is to minimize the exposure you have to these, and then plan on going back and cleaning up logs or log entries as they're collected in the future.